There is a kind of silence that only vast landscapes can hold. A silence so complete that even the softest movement feels like a ripple across something ancient and still. The Sahara Desert carries that silence. It stretches beyond the horizon in every direction, its pale sands shifting slowly with the wind, its skies wide and open in a way that seems almost endless. And yet, for centuries, this quiet and seemingly empty place was crossed again and again by people who carried with them stories, goods, and the fragile threads of connection between distant worlds. To imagine what life was like for traders crossing the Sahara, it helps to begin not in the desert itself, but at its edges, where the journey first took shape. There, in the bustling markets of North African cities or the thriving trade centers just south of the desert, preparations would unfold slowly and carefully. Traders did not rush into the Sahara. They could not. Every step into that immense space required planning, patience, and trust in systems that had been refined over generations. The traders themselves came from many places. Some were Berbers of the desert, deeply familiar with its rhythms. Others came from cities rich with culture and commerce, bringing textiles, metals, or crafted goods. And still others traveled from regions farther south, where gold, ivory, and kola nuts were gathered and prepared for exchange. Each trader carried not only physical goods, but also knowledge. Routes memorized, alliances understood, and stories of past crossings whispered like quiet guidance. There is something gentle in the way these preparations must have unfolded. The sorting of goods, the counting, the weighing, the tying of bundles. These were not hurried actions. They were deliberate, almost meditative. A trader might run his hands over the surface of a folded cloth, checking for imperfections, or examine a bar of salt with quiet focus. Every item mattered. Every detail carried weight. And always, in the background of these preparations, there was the awareness of the desert itself. The Sahara was not simply a place to pass through. It was a presence. Vast, unpredictable, quietly powerful. It shaped every decision long before the first step was taken. Traders knew that once they entered its expanse, there would be no easy turning back. The journey would unfold over weeks, sometimes months, with long stretches of isolation broken only by the company of the caravan and the occasional meeting with another group crossing the same ancient paths. What makes this story so compelling, and perhaps so calming to reflect upon, is the balance between uncertainty and routine. On one hand, the desert was filled with unknowns, shifting dunes, hidden wells, sudden winds. On the other, the traders relied on patterns that had been passed down through generations. Routes were known. Water sources were remembered. The stars above provided guidance when the landscape below offered none. Before departure, there would often be a quiet moment, not marked by ceremony, but by stillness. The caravan assembled, the animals loaded, the people gathered. A final look back at the familiar edges of civilization. It is easy to imagine the soft murmur of voices, the creak of leather, the faint sound of wind brushing against tents or walls. Then slowly, the movement would begin. The first steps into the desert were not dramatic. There was no sudden change, no clear boundary where the known world ended and the unknown began. Instead, the transition was gradual. The ground became drier, the vegetation thinned, the air shifted in a way that was subtle but unmistakable. And with each step, the caravan moved deeper into a space where time seemed to stretch and soften. Life for these traders was defined by motion. Not hurried motion, but steady, measured progress. The caravan would move in a long line, each person and animal following a rhythm that was almost hypnotic. The pace was set not by urgency, but by necessity. Too fast, and the animals would tire. Too slow, and the journey would stretch dangerously long. In this way, the crossing of the Sahara was less about conquering distance and more about maintaining balance. There is a quiet beauty in that idea. The traders were not trying to dominate the desert. They were learning to move within it, to listen, to adapt, to endure. As the caravan settled into its journey, the outside world began to fade. The sounds of cities, the dense textures of marketplaces, the crowded interactions of daily life, all of it gradually dissolved into the open silence of sand and sky. What remained was simpler, more elemental. The soft rhythm of footsteps, the gentle sway of loaded animals, the whisper of wind shifting grains of sand across the surface of the earth. It is in this simplicity that one begins to understand the deeper experience of these traders. Days would pass in a kind of quiet continuity. The sun rising slowly, casting long shadows that stretched across the dunes. The heat building, not suddenly, but gradually, until it settled into everything. The traders would adjust their movements to the rhythm of the day, conserving energy, protecting themselves and their animals from the most intense heat. And then, as evening approached, the light would soften, the air would cool, and the desert would take on a different kind of stillness. But at the beginning, in these early moments of the journey, there was still a sense of anticipation. Not excitement in the loud or dramatic sense, but a quieter awareness, a knowing that the path ahead would test patience and endurance, a recognition that each step carried them farther from certainty and deeper into reliance on skill, memory, and cooperation. It is worth pausing to consider how different this experience was from modern travel. Today, distance can feel compressed. Journeys are measured in hours rather than weeks. The environment is often controlled, predictable. But for these traders, every mile was felt. Every change in the landscape mattered. The journey itself was not something to be endured quickly. It was something to be lived through, moment by moment. And perhaps that is part of what makes this story so soothing to reflect upon. There is a rhythm here that invites the mind to slow down, to follow the steady movement of the caravan, to notice the details, the shifting light, the texture of the sand, the quiet interactions between people who depend on one another in a place where independence is an illusion. Because no trader crossed the Sahara alone. Even at the very beginning, this truth was clear. Caravans were communities. They were networks of trust, built over time and reinforced through shared experience. Each person had a role. Each role mattered. And within that structure, there was a kind of quiet stability. As the caravan moved farther into the desert, the sense of isolation would deepen, but so too would the sense of connection within the group. This balance between solitude and togetherness, between silence and shared effort, is at the heart of what life was like for these traders. It is not a story of constant struggle or dramatic hardship, though those elements were certainly present. Instead, it is a story of continuity, of people who learn to exist within a challenging environment, not through force, but through understanding, through patience, through cooperation. And so, as the first section of this journey unfolds, we find ourselves at the edge of something vast. The desert stretches ahead, quiet and waiting. The caravan moves forward, step by steady step. The traders carry with them not only goods, but knowledge, memory, and a deep awareness of the path they must follow. There is no rush, only movement, only time, only the slow beginning of a very long crossing. As the caravan moves deeper into the Sahara, the land begins to reveal its true nature, though never all at once. The desert does not announce itself with sudden intensity. Instead, it unfolds slowly, like a quiet story told over many days. At first, there are stretches of dry earth broken by sparse vegetation, low shrubs clinging to life in scattered patches. But soon, even these signs of resilience begin to fade, and the landscape opens into something far more expansive. The horizon grows wider, the sky feels larger, and the ground beneath becomes softer, looser, shaped by the steady and patient work of the wind. It is here that the traders begin to fully feel the scale of the Sahara. There is a particular stillness that comes with such vastness. Not an empty stillness, but one filled with subtle motion. The shifting of sand grains, the distant shimmer of heat rising from the ground, the faint whisper of air moving across the dunes. The desert is never truly motionless. It is simply slow in its movements, almost beyond the pace of human perception. For the traders, this environment demanded attention. Every detail mattered. The color of the sand, the direction of the wind, the shape of distant dunes. These were not just visual elements. They were signals, clues, quiet pieces of information that, when understood, could mean the difference between staying on course and becoming lost in a landscape that offered very few clear markers. And yet, despite its challenges, the desert also carried a kind of calm that settled over those who traveled through it. There were long stretches of time where nothing seemed to change. The caravan would move steadily forward, the line of camels swaying gently, their steps measured and deliberate. The traders walked beside them or rode quietly, conserving energy, their thoughts drifting in rhythm with the movement around them. The sun rose each day with a soft but persistent brightness. At first, its light felt gentle, casting long shadows across the sand. But as the hours passed, the warmth would grow into something more intense. The heat did not arrive suddenly. It built slowly, layer by layer, until it pressed down from above and radiated upward from the ground below. This was one of the desert's greatest challenges. Heat in the Sahara was not just a matter of discomfort. It shaped the entire structure of the journey. Traders learned to adjust their movements carefully, often traveling during the cooler parts of the day, early morning and late afternoon, while resting during the harshest midday hours. This rhythm was not optional, it was essential. During those midday pauses, the caravan would gather in whatever shade could be found, though in many places, shade itself was a rare luxury. Sometimes it came from the shadow of a large dune, sometimes from simple coverings carried along for this purpose, and sometimes there was no shade at all, only the quiet stillness of waiting for the sun to begin its slow descent. In these moments, the desert felt both immense and intimate. Immense in its endless stretches, its vast openness. Intimate in the way it narrowed the focus of each trader to the present moment. The need for water, the management of energy, the awareness of one's own body within the heat. Water, of course, was the most constant concern. Every drop carried value. It was measured carefully, distributed with thought and experience guiding each decision. Traders did not drink freely. They drank wisely. Too much too quickly could leave them vulnerable later. Too little could weaken them in ways that might not be immediately noticeable, but would become dangerous over time. There is something deeply human in this careful balance. The act of drinking water becomes more than a simple habit. It becomes a moment of awareness, a small, quiet act that connects the individual to the larger rhythm of survival within the desert. The lifting of a container, the slow sip, the pause, the feeling of relief, however brief. And then the journey continues. The landscape itself offers both beauty and challenge in equal measure. Dunes rise and fall like frozen waves, their shapes constantly reshaped by the wind. Some are gentle and rolling, others are steep and sharply defined. The caravan must navigate these forms with care, choosing paths that conserve energy for both people and animals. Climbing a dune is not simply a matter of walking upward. It requires effort, coordination, and sometimes the adjustment of loads to ensure that the animals can manage the ascent. From the top of a dune, the view stretches outward in all directions. Layers of sand extend to the horizon, their colors shifting subtly with the light, from pale gold to deeper amber tones. It is a view that can feel both peaceful and overwhelming. There are no clear paths, no roads, no markers to follow. Only the memory of routes passed down through generations, and the knowledge held by those who guide the caravan. These guides were essential, often drawn from communities with deep experience in desert travel. They carried an understanding of the land that went beyond simple observation. They knew where water might be found, even when it was hidden. They understood how the wind shaped the dunes, and how those shapes could be read like a quiet map. They watched the sky, noting patterns in the movement of clouds or the clarity of the air. And at night, they turned to the stars. But for now, in the long daylight hours, the desert's challenges remained grounded in the physical world. Wind, for example, could shift from a gentle presence to something far more disruptive. A calm breeze might simply move the surface of the sand, creating delicate patterns that caught the light. But stronger winds could lift sand into the air, reducing visibility and making travel difficult. In more intense cases, sandstorms could emerge, surrounding the caravan in a moving haze that blurred the boundaries between earth and sky. During such moments, the traders would respond with practiced calm. They would protect their faces, shield their eyes, and stay close together. Movement would slow or stop entirely, depending on the severity of the storm. There was no advantage in rushing through such conditions. Patience was always the safer path. It is interesting to reflect on how much of this journey depended not on speed, but on restraint. The desert did not reward urgency. It required adaptation, a willingness to pause, a respect for forces that could not be controlled, only understood and endured. And yet, despite all of this, there were also moments of quiet beauty that emerged without warning. The way the light shifted as clouds passed overhead, briefly softening the brightness of the sun. The patterns left behind by the wind, intricate and delicate, as if drawn by an unseen hand. The occasional sight of distant hills or rocky outcrops breaking the continuity of sand, offering a different texture to the landscape. Even the silence itself carried a kind of comfort. In a world often filled with constant noise, the deep quiet of the Sahara could feel almost soothing. The absence of distraction allowed the mind to settle, to move at a slower pace, much like the caravan itself. Thoughts would come and go, unhurried, shaped by the steady rhythm of walking and the gentle repetition of daily routines. For the traders, this environment was not simply a challenge to overcome. It was a space they learned to exist within. They observed, they adapted, they respected the limits imposed by the land, and in doing so, they found a way to move through one of the most demanding landscapes on Earth with a kind of quiet resilience. As the days passed, the initial sense of entering something unfamiliar began to shift. The desert, while still vast and unpredictable, became a little more known, not fully understood, never fully mastered, but recognized in its patterns and rhythms. And within that recognition, there was a subtle easing of the mind. The caravan continued forward, its movement steady and unbroken. The traders adjusted to the heat, the light, the silence. They carried on step by step, guided by experience and the quiet knowledge that others had walked these paths long before them. The Sahara stretched endlessly ahead, but so too did the journey. As the journey continues deeper into the Sahara, another presence begins to stand out more clearly, not as part of the landscape, but as an essential companion to those who cross it. Moving in steady rhythm beside the traders are the camels, their long strides measured, their movements calm and deliberate. Without them, the great crossings of the Sahara would not have been possible. They were not simply animals of burden. They were the quiet foundation upon which the entire system of desert trade depended. There is something almost meditative in watching a camel caravan move across the sand. The line stretches slowly across the dunes, each animal following the one ahead, guided by instinct and training. Their bodies sway gently with each step, a motion that becomes almost hypnotic over time. The traders walk alongside them or ride upon their backs, their own movements gradually aligning with the steady pace set by these remarkable animals. Camels are uniquely suited to the desert, and over generations people came to understand and rely upon this suitability with deep respect. Their wide, padded feet spread their weight across the sand, allowing them to move where other animals would struggle. Their long legs keep their bodies elevated above the heat of the ground. Their ability to conserve water and endure long periods without drinking made them invaluable in a land where water was often scarce and uncertain. But beyond these physical traits, there is a quieter aspect to their role. Camels brought stability. In a landscape that could feel vast and unpredictable, their steady presence provided a kind of reassurance. They moved at a consistent pace. They responded to familiar commands. They carried heavy loads without complaint, their endurance shaping the very rhythm of the journey. Traders learned to trust them, not blindly, but through repeated experience, through the quiet accumulation of shared time in the desert. Each camel carried goods carefully packed and secured. Bundles of salt, tightly bound and stacked. Rolls of cloth wrapped against the dust. Small chests or sacks containing items of greater value. The arrangement of these loads was not random. It required balance, both for the comfort of the animal and the safety of the goods. Before departure, and often during the journey, traders would check these loads with attentive care. They would tighten straps, adjust the positioning of bundles, and ensure that nothing had shifted in a way that might cause strain. This work was done calmly, without haste. It was part of the daily rhythm, a quiet act of maintenance that reflected a deeper understanding of the long road ahead. The relationship between trader and camel was built over time. A trader might know the temperament of each animal in the caravan. Some camels were more patient, others more stubborn. Some moved with ease across the dunes, while others required gentle encouragement. These differences were not seen as problems, but as characteristics to be understood and worked with. Communication was subtle, a soft sound, a light pull on a rope, a shift in posture. These small signals guided the animals, maintaining the slow, steady flow of the caravan. There was no need for forceful direction. The pace of the journey did not demand urgency, only consistency. It is interesting to consider how this partnership between human and animal shaped the experience of the crossing. The traders did not simply move through the desert on their own strength. They moved together with the camels, forming a single, interconnected system. Each depended on the other. The camels carried the goods and often the traders themselves. The traders provided guidance, care, and protection. This mutual reliance created a quiet bond, and within that bond there was a kind of shared endurance. The caravan itself was carefully organized. At the front there might be a lead camel, guided by an experienced handler who set the direction and pace. Behind, the rest of the animals followed in line, each connected by ropes or guided by familiarity with the movement of the group. The traders spread out alongside them, some walking, some riding, all attentive to the flow of the caravan. The length of such a caravan could be quite impressive. Dozens, sometimes hundreds of camels moving together, stretching across the sand in a slow, continuous line. From a distance, it might appear almost like a living thread weaving its way through the vastness of the desert. Yet despite its size, the caravan moved quietly. There were no loud commands, no hurried gestures, only the soft sounds of footsteps pressing into sand, the faint creak of leather, the occasional low call of a camel. These sounds blended into the larger silence of the desert, becoming part of its rhythm rather than disrupting it. As the days passed, the traders would grow accustomed to this rhythm. The gentle sway of the camels became familiar. The pace of walking settled into the body, requiring less conscious effort. Even the act of mounting and dismounting the animals, something that might feel awkward at first, became smooth and practiced. There is a calmness in repetition. Each day followed a similar pattern, shaped by the needs of the journey and the environment. The camels would be loaded in the early hours when the air was still cool. The caravan would set out, moving steadily until the heat of the day encouraged a pause. Then, as the sun began to lower, the journey would resume. Through all of this, the camels remained central. They were not just carriers of goods, but carriers of possibility. Without them, the exchange of goods across the Sahara would have been limited, slow, and far more dangerous. With them, entire networks of trade could flourish, connecting distant regions in ways that might otherwise have seemed impossible. There is something quietly remarkable about that. A single species, adapted to a challenging environment, becoming the key to human connection across vast distances. It is a reminder that progress is not always driven by force or speed, but often by harmony with the natural world. At times, the traders would pause to allow the camels to rest. These moments were unhurried, The animals would kneel, folding their long legs beneath them in a practice motion. Loads might remain in place or be adjusted slightly to ease pressure. The traders would move among them, checking straps, offering small amounts of water when available, and ensuring that each animal was in good condition. Care was essential. A weakened camel could slow the entire caravan. More importantly, it represented a loss not only of an animal, but of the goods it carried and the balance it contributed to the group. Traders understood this deeply, and their attention reflected that understanding. There is a quiet respect in this care. It is not spoken loudly or marked by ceremony, but it is present in the consistent, thoughtful actions taken day after day. The brushing of sand from a coat, the careful inspection of hooves, the adjustment of a load to prevent strain. These small acts formed the foundation of a successful journey. As evening approached and the light softened, the camels would once again play a central role. They would be guided to rest areas, their loads removed or secured, their bodies allowed to relax after the steady effort of the day. The traders would gather nearby, forming temporary camps that would exist only for a single night before being left behind without trace. In the quiet of these evenings, the presence of the camels added to the sense of continuity. They were there at the beginning of the day, in its middle, and at its end. Their steady endurance mirrored the endurance required of the traders themselves. Together, they moved through the desert, not in opposition to it, but in a kind of quiet alignment. It is this alignment that defines much of what life was like for traders crossing the Sahara. Not a struggle against the land, but a careful negotiation with it. Not a journey of speed, but one of patience. And at the heart of it all, the camel caravan, steady, resilient, and quietly essential. As the caravan continues its slow progress across the endless sand, the bond between human and animal deepens with each passing day. The desert remains vast, the journey remains long, but the rhythm holds, and the caravan moves on. As the caravan settles fully into the long crossing, the days begin to take on a familiar shape, not identical, but steady enough to create a sense of quiet continuity. Life in the Sahara was not marked by sudden change or constant variation. Instead, it unfolded through repetition, through small, deliberate actions that carried the traders forward one day at a time. Morning began before the sun had fully risen. There was a softness to this hour, a coolness in the air that felt almost fragile, as if it might disappear at any moment. The sky would shift slowly from deep blue to pale gold, and the first light would stretch gently across the dunes. In this calm, the traders would begin their preparations. There was no rush. Movements were measured, quiet. The camels would be encouraged to rise, unfolding their legs in a slow, practiced motion. Loads would be checked again, even if they had been secured carefully the evening before. Ropes tightened, bundles adjusted. Each action carried a sense of attention, a quiet awareness that small details could have lasting consequences. The traders themselves moved with a kind of calm focus. Some would take a moment to drink a measured amount of water, others to eat a simple portion of food. There was no abundance here, only enough. Enough to sustain, enough to continue. These early moments held a kind of stillness, as if the day had not yet fully awakened. Then, as the light grew stronger, the caravan would begin to move. The first steps of the morning always felt gentle, the sand still cool from the night, gave way softly beneath their feet. The camels settled into their rhythm quickly, their long strides steady and unhurried. The traders walked beside them or rode quietly, their bodies adjusting to the motion almost without thought. There is something deeply soothing in such repetition. The same movements, the same pace, the same quiet sounds. Over time, these patterns become familiar, almost comforting. The mind begins to relax into them, no longer anticipating sudden change, but instead following the gentle flow of the day. As the sun climbed higher, the light would sharpen. Shadow shortened. The warmth in the air deepened. What had begun as a cool and peaceful morning gradually transformed into something more intense. The traders did not resist this change. They expected it. They planned for it. By midday, the heat would press down from above, settling into everything. This was the time to pause. The caravan would slow, then stop. The camels encouraged to kneel once more, their loads either left in place or carefully adjusted. The traders would gather, seeking whatever shade could be found or created. Sometimes it was only a narrow strip of shadow along the side of a dune. Sometimes it was the shade of a cloth stretched between poles. In these moments, activity faded. Voices grew quieter, movement slowed. The focus shifted from progress to preservation, of energy, of water, of strength. Some traders might rest with their eyes closed, not fully asleep, but drifting in a state between awareness and rest. Others would check supplies, count what remained, and consider what lay ahead. Time during these midday pauses felt different. It stretched. Without the forward movement of the caravan, without the gradual change of scenery, the hours seemed to linger. The sun held its place in the sky, unwavering. The air remained still, heavy with heat, and within that stillness, the traders simply waited. There is a kind of quiet discipline in waiting, not impatience, not frustration, just acceptance. The understanding that this pause was necessary, that moving forward in such heat would cost more than it would gain. So they waited, conserving what they could, allowing the day to move at its own pace. Eventually, the light would begin to soften again. It happened gradually. The harsh brightness eased. Shadows returned, growing longer across the sand. The air cooled, just slightly at first, then more noticeably. This was the signal to move once more. The caravan would rise again, camels standing, loads checked, ropes secured. The traders would gather themselves, adjusting clothing, preparing for the next stretch of travel. There was no need for instruction. The rhythm of the day was known to all. And so, the journey continued into the late afternoon. This was often one of the most pleasant times to travel. The heat had eased, but the light still remained strong enough to guide the way. The desert took on a softer appearance, its colors deepening, its edges less harsh. The traders moved with renewed energy, though still with the same steady, measured pace. As evening approached, the sky began its quiet transformation. The blue faded into shades of orange and gold, then slowly into deeper tones. The sun lowered itself toward the horizon, and with it, the temperature dropped more noticeably. The desert, which had felt so intense during the day, became calm once more. This was when the caravan would prepare to stop for the night. The choice of location mattered. It was not random. Traders would look for areas that offered some natural protection, perhaps a cluster of dunes that could block the wind, or a slight depression in the land that provided a sense of shelter. Once chosen, the caravan would settle in. The camels would kneel again, their loads removed or secured. The traders would begin the quiet process of establishing a temporary camp. There was something almost ritual-like in these actions. Simple tasks repeated day after day. Arranging sleeping areas, preparing small meals, checking water supplies, caring for the animals. These tasks were not performed with urgency, but with a calm efficiency that came from experience. As darkness fell, the desert changed to once more. The heat of the day faded into a cool, sometimes even cold, night. The sky, now free from the brightness of the sun, revealed its full depth. Stars appeared slowly at first, then in greater numbers, until the entire sky seemed filled with points of light. For the traders, this night sky was both beautiful and practical. It offered guidance. Familiar patterns of stars helped confirm their direction, reinforcing the knowledge carried by the guides. But beyond this practical use, there was also a quiet sense of wonder. In the stillness of the desert night, the sky felt closer, larger, more present. The traders might sit quietly, looking upward, their thoughts drifting in ways that were difficult to describe. The journey, the distance, the effort, all of it softened in these moments. What remained was a sense of connection to the land, to the sky, to the long path they were following. Eventually, rest would come, not always deep or uninterrupted, but enough to recover, enough to prepare for the next day. The sounds of the caravan would fade into the background, the occasional movement of a camel, the soft shifting of sand in the wind, and then slowly the cycle would begin again. Morning light, preparation, movement, heat, rest, movement once more, evening, night. There is a quiet comfort in such a rhythm. It simplifies life. It narrows the focus to what is necessary, to what can be managed within the limits of the environment. There is little room for distraction, little space for excess. Each day becomes a gentle repetition of effort and rest, of movement and stillness. For the traders, this rhythm was not something to escape. It was something to live within. And as the caravan continued its slow passage across the Sahara, this daily pattern became the foundation of their experience, carrying them forward through the vast and ever-changing desert. As the caravan continues its steady journey across the Sahara, carrying its rhythm from one day into the next, it is easy to become absorbed in the movement itself. The footsteps, the shifting light, the endless sand. But within this quiet progression lies the deeper purpose of the journey, something that gives meaning to each mile traveled. The traders were not simply crossing the desert for the experience of it. They were carrying goods, carefully chosen, carefully packed. Each item held value, not just in its material form, but in the connections it would create once the journey reached its distant destinations. Trade across the Sahara was not a simple exchange of objects. It was a network of relationships, built slowly over time, linking regions that might otherwise remain separate. And within the calm repetition of the journey, these goods traveled silently, waiting for the moment when they would be unpacked, examined, and exchanged. Among the most iconic of these goods was salt. It may seem simple, almost ordinary, but in many parts of West Africa, salt was as valuable as gold. In some regions, it was essential for preserving food, for maintaining health, for daily survival in climates where resources could be unpredictable. Large slabs of salt, cut from deposits in the desert, were shaped into manageable blocks and loaded carefully onto camels. These salt blocks were heavy. Their weight added to the burden carried by the animals, requiring careful balance and thoughtful packing. Traders understood this well. A poorly secured load could shift, causing discomfort or even injury to a camel. So each slab was positioned with care, tied securely, checked again and again throughout the journey. Alongside salt, there was gold. Gold from the regions south of the Sahara moved northward, carried in small quantities relative to its value. It did not need to be bulky. Its worth lay in its rarity, its beauty, its ability to be shaped into coins, jewelry, or symbols of status. Traders handled it with discretion. It was not displayed openly. It was protected, both physically and through the quiet agreements that govern trade. There is something almost poetic in this balance. Heavy salt, essential for life, moving in one direction. Light gold, valued for its rarity, moving in another. Each finding its way across the same vast desert, guided by the same slow caravans. But these were not the only goods carried across the Sahara. Textiles were common, especially from the north. Fine fabrics, carefully woven, often dyed in rich colors. These materials held both practical and cultural significance. They could be worn, traded further, or used as symbols of wealth and identity. There were also items of craftsmanship, metal tools, decorative objects, pottery, small but meaningful pieces that reflected the skills of the people who created them. Each item carried with it a story of its origin, a quiet trace of the place and the hands that had shaped it. From the south, in addition to gold, came goods like ivory and kola nuts. Ivory, smooth and pale, valued for its beauty and its use in carving. Kola nuts, small and unassuming in appearance, held significance as both a stimulant and a social offering, often used in rituals or shared in gatherings. These items, though different in form, shared a common role. They were part of a larger system of exchange that extended far beyond the desert itself. What is striking about this system is its quiet complexity. There were no written contract carried across the dunes, no formal marketplaces within the desert itself. The exchange of goods depended on trust, on reputation, on the careful maintenance of relationships over time. Traders knew who they would meet at the edges of the desert, in the cities and settlements that served as hubs of commerce. And so, as they traveled, the goods they carried were not just objects. They were promises, promises of exchange, of value recognized and returned, of connections maintained across distance. During the journey itself, these goods remained mostly untouched. There were no transactions in the open desert, no exchanges between caravans except in rare and specific circumstances. Instead, the traders focused on preservation, protecting what they carried from the elements, from damage, from loss. Sand could be surprisingly intrusive. Fine grains worked their way into everything, settling into folds of cloth, slipping into containers, coating surfaces with a thin layer that required constant attention. Traders would check their goods regularly, brushing away sand, adjusting coverings, ensuring that everything remained secure. There is a quiet patience in this care. The journey was long, and the value of the goods depended not only on their origin, but on their condition upon arrival. A damaged item might lose its worth. A spoiled good could become useless. So the traders maintained a steady vigilance, not with anxiety, but with calm attentiveness. At times, small adjustments would be made. A bundle might be shifted from one camel to another to balance the load. A container might be opened briefly to check its contents, These actions were done carefully, often during the cooler parts of the day, when the traders had the energy and clarity to focus on such details. There was also a mental aspect to this process. Traders kept track of what they carried, not always through written records, but through memory. They knew the quantities, the qualities, the intended destinations. This knowledge was part of their skill, part of what defined them as traders. It is easy to imagine these thoughts accompanying them as they walked, a quiet awareness of the goods behind them, a consideration of their value, a reflection on the exchanges to come. These thoughts would not be constant or overwhelming, but they would be present, woven gently into the rhythm of the journey. And yet, despite the importance of these goods, the journey itself remained calm. There was no urgency to reach the destination as quickly as possible. Speed did not increase value. Care did. Patience did. The traders understood that the desert set its own pace, and the goods would arrive in their time, not before. This creates an interesting contrast. On one hand, the goods represented wealth, necessity, and connection. On the other, the journey required detachment from immediate gain. The traders could not rush to profit. They had to move slowly, steadily, trusting that the process itself would lead to the desired outcome. There is a quiet lesson in that. Value is not always realized in the moment of action. Sometimes it is carried, protected, and brought forward through time, only to be recognized later. As the caravan moves onward, the goods remain silent. They do not announce their importance. They do not demand attention, and yet they are the reason for the journey, the thread that connects distant regions, the quiet purpose that underlies each step taken across the sand. The traders, too, carry this purpose quietly. They do not speak of it constantly. They do not display it openly, but it is there in the careful ways they pack, in the attention they give to their loads, in the steady commitment to continue forward despite the length of the journey. And so, through days of heat and nights of stillness, the goods travel with them. Salt, gold, cloth, ivory, kola nuts, each item a small piece of a much larger exchange, a larger story that stretches beyond the horizon. The desert remains vast and quiet. The caravan moves steadily, and within that movement, value flows silently across the sands, carried by patience, protected by care, and guided by the quiet understanding that what is being transported is more than just goods. It is connection. As the caravan presses onward through the vast and shifting landscape of the Sahara, a quiet question lingers beneath each step, one that is never spoken loudly but is always present. How do they know where to go? In a land where the horizon looks the same in every direction, where dunes rise and fall without clear pattern, and where the wind slowly reshapes the ground itself, navigation becomes something far more subtle than simply following a path. There are no roads here, no signs, no fixed markers that remain unchanged over time. And yet, for centuries, traders cross these same distances, arriving with remarkable consistency at their intended destinations. The answer lies not in a single method, but in a blend of observation, memory, and quiet experience. Guides, often the most experienced members of the caravan, carried much of this responsibility. Their knowledge was not written in books or drawn on maps in the way we might imagine today. Instead, it lived within them, shaped by years of travel, by stories passed down, and by a deep familiarity with the patterns of the desert. They did not simply look at the land, they read it. The dunes themselves offered clues, though subtle ones. The direction of the wind left its mark in the shape and slope of the arimal. One side of a dune might be smoother, gently sloping in the direction the wind most often traveled. The other side might be steeper, sharper, shaped by the shifting movement of sand over time. By observing these forms, a skilled guide could sense prevailing directions, even when the landscape seemed uniform. But dunes alone were not enough. The desert changed too frequently for them to serve as reliable markers over long distances. What was needed was a deeper framework, something more constant. And this is where the sky became essential. During the day, the sun provided orientation, though it required careful attention. Its position shifted slowly, and the intensity of its light could sometimes blur perception. But over time, guides developed an instinctive understanding of its movement, using it as a reference point while adjusting for the gradual passage of hours. Still, it was the night sky that offered the greatest clarity. When darkness settled over the desert and the air cooled, the sky revealed itself fully. Stars emerged in vast numbers, steady and unchanging in their patterns. For those who knew how to read them, they formed a map far more reliable than anything found on the ground. Certain stars held particular importance. Their positions, their movements, their relationships to one another. These details were memorized and understood. A guide might look upward and with quiet certainty adjust the direction of the caravan. There was no need for instruments. The knowledge itself was enough. It is a remarkable thing to consider. To stand beneath such a sky, surrounded by silence, and to find direction not through written instruction, but through memory and observation. It speaks to a different kind of awareness, one that develops slowly through patience and repeated experience. During the journey, this navigation was not constant in an active sense. Guides did not pause at every step to reassess direction. Instead, they maintained a steady awareness, making small adjustments as needed. The caravan moved forward in a way that felt natural, almost effortless, even though beneath that calm surface lay a continuous process of observation and decision-making. There were also known routes, passed down through generations. These routes were not marked physically, but they existed in collective memory. Traders knew the general paths that connected certain regions, the approximate distances between water sources, the areas where the terrain might become more difficult or more open. This shared knowledge created a kind of invisible network across the desert. Caravans followed these routes, not because they were the only possible paths, but because they were the most reliable. They represented accumulated experience, the result of countless journeys that had come before. And yet, even with this knowledge, uncertainty remained. The desert was not static. Winds could alter the shape of the land. Seasonal changes could affect the availability of water. Unexpected conditions could arise without warning. In these moments, the skill of the guide became even more important. There is a quiet tension in this balance. On one hand, there is knowledge and preparation. On the other, there is the unpredictable nature of the environment. The traders did not eliminate uncertainty. They learned to move within it. Water sources, in particular, played a critical role in navigation. Wells and oases were not scattered randomly. They existed in specific locations, known to those who had traveled the routes before. Reaching them was essential. Missing one could place the entire caravan at risk. Guides kept these locations in mind constantly, measuring distance not just in miles, but in relation to the next water source. The journey was structured around these points, each one a place of rest, replenishment, and brief relief from the demands of the desert. When a caravan approached such a place, there was often a quiet shift in energy. The pace might quicken slightly, not from urgency, but from a shared awareness of what lay ahead. The sight of an oasis, even from a distance, brought a sense of calm reassurance, water, shade, a temporary pause in the long continuity of sand and sky. But finding these places required precision. A slight deviation in direction, extended over many days, could lead the caravan away from its intended path. This is why navigation was not a task taken lightly. It was continuous, careful, and deeply respected. There were also other signs, more subtle, that could assist in finding the way. The presence of certain plants, even sparse ones, might indicate underground moisture. The behavior of animals, rare though they were in such an environment, could hint at nearby water or shelter. Even the feel of the air, its dryness or faint traces of humidity, could offer clues. These signs were not always obvious. They required attention, patience, a willingness to observe without rushing to conclusions. And over time, experienced travelers developed a sensitivity to these details, an intuitive sense that complemented their more structured knowledge. For those less experienced, there was trust. Trust in the guides, trust in the system, trust in the collective wisdom that had allowed so many journeys to succeed before. This trust was not blind. It was built through experience, through the steady confirmation that the caravan continued to move in the right direction, that water was found when expected, that the journey, though long, remained on course. There is something deeply calming in this trust. In a landscape that offers few clear answers, the reliance on shared knowledge and quiet expertise creates a sense of stability. The traders do not need to question every step. They move forward with confidence, even in the face of uncertainty. As the caravan continues its passage, the process of navigation becomes almost invisible. It blends into the rhythm of the journey, just another part of the steady flow of movement. And yet, it remains one of the most important aspects of the entire crossing. Without it, the vastness of the Sahara would become overwhelming. With it, the desert becomes navigable, not easy, but understandable. A place that can be crossed with care, with patience, and with a deep respect for the knowledge required to move through it. The traders walk on. The camels follow their steady line. The guide looks ahead, occasionally upward, always aware. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the next destination waits, connected not by visible paths, but by memory, by stars, and by the quiet art of finding the way. As the sun lowers itself toward the edge of the world, and the long shadows stretch across the dunes, the desert begins its gentle transformation once again. The intense brightness of the day softens into warmer tones, gold fading into amber, amber into a quiet red that lingers just above the horizon. The heat, which once pressed heavily upon every movement, begins to loosen its hold, allowing the air to cool in slow and subtle waves. For the traders, this time of day carries a quiet significance. It is not simply the end of travel, but the beginning of a different kind of activity. The caravan, which has moved steadily across the sand for hours, now prepares to rest. The decision of where to stop is made with care. guided by experience rather than chance. A cluster of dunes may offer shelter from the wind. A slight hollow in the land may provide a sense of enclosure. Even the direction of the breeze is considered, as the desert, though calm, can shift without warning. Once a suitable place is found, the caravan begins to settle. The camels are guided to kneel, their long legs folding beneath them with a slow and practiced grace. One by one, the loads are loosened and adjusted, sometimes removed entirely, sometimes left in place depending on the needs of the moment. The traders move among them, their actions unhurried but purposeful, ensuring that each animal is comfortable, that nothing has been strained or damaged during the day's journey. There is a quiet rhythm to this process. Ropes are untied, bundles are checked. Water is distributed in careful amounts. The sounds are soft, the faint creak of leather, the shifting of sand underfoot, the low murmur of voices exchanging brief words or simple acknowledgements. No one speaks loudly. There is no need. The desert itself seems to encourage a gentler tone. As the last light fades, the camp begins to take shape. It is not elaborate. It is not permanent. Each night's camp exists only for a short time, leaving little trace once the caravan moves on. Simple coverings may be arranged for sleeping. Small areas are designated for food preparation. The goods, so carefully carried throughout the day, are kept close and protected. Their presence a quiet reminder of the purpose behind the journey. The traders, now free from the steady motion of travel, begin to shift into a slower pace. Some sit quietly, allowing their bodies to rest, feeling the gentle release of tension that comes after hours of movement. Others attend to small tasks, repairing a strap, brushing sand from a piece of cloth, checking the condition of their belongings. These actions are not urgent. They are part of the natural flow of the evening, small acts that maintain order and readiness for the days ahead. Food, when it is prepared, is simple. There is no abundance here, no elaborate meals. The traders rely on provisions that can endure the journey, dried foods, grains, small portions that provide enough sustenance without excess. The act of eating is quiet, shared but not crowded with conversation. It is a moment of nourishment, a gentle pause in the rhythm of the day. And then, as darkness settles fully, the desert reveals another of its quiet wonders. The sky opens. Without the light of cities or settlements, without any obstruction, the stars appear in extraordinary clarity. At first, a few points of light emerge, faint and distant. Then more follow, until the entire sky seems filled with them, stretching endlessly in every direction. Patterns that might go unnoticed elsewhere become vivid here. Constellations forming shapes, lines and pathways that have guided travelers for generations. For the traders, this night sky is both familiar and quietly profound. It offers guidance, yes, but in these moments of rest, it also offers something deeper, a sense of scale, a reminder of the vastness not only of the desert, but of the world beyond it. Sitting beneath such a sky, the journey itself may feel both small and significant at the same time. There is often a stillness that settles over the camp at night. The wind, if it moves at all, does so gently. The sand, so active during the day, becomes calm. The camels rest, their bodies quiet, their breathing slow and steady. The traders, too, begin to withdraw into themselves, their thoughts softening, their awareness shifting from the external to the internal. Some may speak quietly, sharing brief reflections or simple stories. These conversations are not loud or animated. They are calm, measured, shaped by the need for rest and the presence of the surrounding silence. A memory might be shared, a thought about the journey ahead, a small observation about the day that has just passed. And then gradually the voices fade. Sleep comes slowly, not as a sudden shift, but as a gentle transition. The body, tired from the day's effort, begins to relax. The mind, no longer focused on navigation or movement, drifts into quieter patterns. The traders lie beneath the open sky or beneath simple coverings, their breathing steady, their form still against the vast backdrop of the desert. There is a vulnerability in this rest. The desert is never entirely without risk. The night can bring cold, sometimes more intense than expected. The wind may shift, and yet there is also trust. Trust in the location chosen for the camp, trust in the presence of the group, trust in the routines that have been followed again and again. This balance between vulnerability and trust defines much of the nighttime experience. The traders do not attempt to control the desert. They accept its conditions, prepare as best they can, and then allow themselves to rest within it. It is a quiet form of resilience, one that does not rely on force, but on understanding and adaptation. At times, a trader might wake during the night, perhaps from the chill in the air or the subtle movement of a camel nearby. In these moments, the stillness of the desert becomes even more apparent. The sky remains vast and unchanged, the stars steady in their positions. The camp, though temporary, feels grounded, a small point of human presence within an immense and silent landscape. There is something deeply calming in this image. A group of travelers resting together beneath the open sky, surrounded by nothing but sand and starlight. The journey paused, but not ended. The movement held gently in place, waiting for the next day to begin. Eventually, morning approaches once more. The first light appears quietly, almost unnoticed at first. A faint glow on the horizon, a subtle shift in the color of the sky. The coolness of the night lingers, but it begins to change, slowly giving way to the warmth that will follow. The traders wake, not abruptly, but gradually. The body senses the change in light, the approach of a new day. Movements begin again, small at first, then more purposeful. The camels are stirred, the loads prepared, the camp dismantled with the same calm efficiency with which it was created. There is no trace left behind. The sand settles, the shape smooth over. The desert returns to its quiet, undisturbed state, as if the camp had never existed at all. And then, once more, the caravan begins to move. The rhythm resumes. The journey continues. As the caravan continues its long and measured passage across the Sahara, something deeper begins to take shape beyond the movement of individuals and animals. What may first appear as a simple line of traders and camels gradually reveals itself as something more complex, more interconnected. The caravan is not just a group traveling together. It is a small, temporary community, formed through necessity, sustained by cooperation, and guided by shared understanding. No one crosses the Sahara alone. This truth is not simply practical, though it certainly is that. It is also deeply human. The desert, vast and unyielding, gently insists on cooperation. It does not allow for isolation in any lasting way. Those who enter it must rely on one another, not in dramatic or constant ways, but through steady, quiet acts of support that unfold day after day. Within the caravan, each person carries a role. Some are experienced traders, familiar with the rhythms of the journey and the nature of the goods being transported. Others may be newer to the crossing, learning through observation and participation. There are guides whose knowledge of the land shapes the direction of travel. There are those who focus on the care of the animals, ensuring that the camels remain strong and capable. And there are others who assist where needed, stepping into tasks as they arise. These roles are not rigid. They shift gently, depending on the needs of the moment. A trader who focuses on goods may also help adjust loads. A guide may lend a hand in caring for a tired animal. The boundaries between responsibilities are soft, allowing for a kind of fluid cooperation that supports the entire group. There is a quiet understanding that binds them. It is not always spoken, but it is felt. The awareness that each person's actions contribute to the well-being of the caravan as a whole, that a small effort offered at the right moment can ease the burden of another. That success in crossing the desert is not an individual achievement, but a shared one. This understanding shapes behavior in subtle ways. A trader might notice a rope that has loosened on a nearby camel and step forward to secure it, even if it is not their assigned responsibility. Another might offer a portion of water to someone who appears more fatigued, knowing that balance within the group benefits everyone. These gestures are not grand. They are small, almost quiet, but they accumulate, creating a steady foundation of mutual support. There is also trust, not the kind that is declared openly, but the kind that grows through repetition. Day after day, each member of the caravan observes the others, how they move, how they respond to challenges, how they contribute. Over time, patterns emerge. Reliability becomes evident, and with that, trust deepens. This trust allows the caravan to function smoothly. There is no need for constant instruction or oversight. Each person understands their place within the rhythm of the journey. Decisions, when they arise, are often guided by those with the most experience, but they are supported by the collective awareness of the group. At times, the caravan may encounter others crossing the desert. These meetings are not always frequent, but when they occur, they carry a quiet significance. Two groups, each moving through the same vast landscape, briefly sharing space and presence. There may be an exchange of greetings, a few words spoken softly, perhaps some small sharing of information about conditions ahead, about water sources, about the general state of the routes. These interactions are brief. The desert encourages movement, not lingering. But even in their brevity, they reinforce a larger sense of connection. The traders are not alone in their journey. They are part of a broader network, one that extends across the desert, linking many caravans, many communities, many paths. Within the caravan itself, relationships form naturally, not in dramatic ways, but through shared experience. Walking side by side, resting together in the shade, sitting quietly beneath the stars at night. These moments, repeated over time, create bonds that are simple but meaningful. There may be conversations, though they are often gentle and unhurried. A trader might share a memory of a previous journey, describing a distant place or particular challenge faced and overcome. Another might speak of the destination ahead, of the markets that await, of the exchanges that will take place. These stories are not told with urgency. They are offered calmly, as part of the quiet flow of the evening. Sometimes there is laughter, soft, brief, carried lightly on the air. It does not break the calm of the desert, but blends into it, adding a human warmth to the stillness. These moments of lightness are important. They remind the traders of their shared humanity, of the life that continues even within the demands of the journey. There are also moments of quiet support that go unnoticed by most. A trader who walks a little closer to someone who seems tired. A hand extended to help another mount a camel. A shared glance that acknowledges effort without the need for words. These are the threads that hold the caravan together, invisible but strong. The animals, too, are part of this community. Though they do not speak, their presence shapes the interactions of the group. Caring for them requires cooperation. Managing their movement requires coordination. Their well-being is tied directly to the success of the journey, and so they are included, in a sense, within the network of mutual reliance. As the days pass, the caravan becomes more than the sum of its parts. It develops a rhythm that is shared, a pace that is understood by all. There is less need for adjustment, less uncertainty. The group moves as one, not in perfect uniformity, but in a way that feels connected, aligned. This alignment is not forced. It emerges naturally through the repetition of shared experience, through the quiet recognition that each person is part of something larger than themselves, that their individual actions contribute to a collective movement across the vastness of the desert. There is a calm strength in this, a strength that does not rely on dominance or control, but on cooperation and understanding. The desert, in its quiet way, teaches this lesson. It does not reward isolation. It encourages connection, not through words, but through necessity. And within this environment, the traders respond. They form communities that exist only for the duration of the journey, yet leave lasting impressions on those who are part of them. Relationships that may continue beyond the desert, carried into the markets and cities where the journey ends, or relationships that remain tied to the experience itself, remembered quietly as part of the crossing. As the caravan moves forward, this sense of community remains steady. It is present in the way the group gathers at night, in the way tasks are shared, in the way silence is held together rather than alone. It is not always visible, but it is always there, shaping the experience of each individual within the larger whole. The desert stretches on, vast and unchanged, but within it, the caravan carries something that the landscape does not provide on its own: connection. As the caravan continues its long passage across the Sahara, the steady rhythm of movement begins to reveal another layer of the experience, one that is less visible but deeply felt. Beyond the routines, beyond the cooperation, beyond even the physical challenges of heat and distance, there is something quieter unfolding within each trader. Endurance, not only of the body, but of the mind. The desert, in its vast stillness, has a way of drawing attention inward. There are few distractions, no crowded streets, no constant noise, no shifting demands of a busy world. Instead, there is space, endless space. And within that space, thoughts begin to settle, stretch, and sometimes wander in ways they might not elsewhere. At first, the journey may feel straightforward. Walk, rest, continue. The repetition offers a kind of comfort. But as the days pass and the landscape changes only subtly, the mind begins to notice the passage of time more deeply. Each step becomes part of a larger accumulation. Each day blends gently into the next. And within this blending, endurance takes shape. The body adapts. Muscles grow accustomed to the steady pace. The act of walking, which may have felt tiring at the beginning, becomes more natural, almost automatic. The traders learn how to conserve energy, how to move efficiently, how to listen to the signals of their own bodies. Fatigue does not disappear, but it becomes familiar, something to be managed rather than resisted. There is a quiet wisdom in this adaptation. The traders do not fight the limits of their bodies. They work within them. They adjust their pace, their rest, their intake of water and food. They accept that energy is not constant, that some days will feel heavier than others, and through this acceptance, they maintain a steady continuity. But the mind is more complex. In the absence of constant stimulation, it begins to wander. Memories surface. Thoughts drift between past and future. A trader might recall a place left behind, a market, a home, a familiar voice. These memories do not arrive with urgency. They come softly, like distant echoes, accompanying the rhythm of footsteps. There may also be thoughts of the destination. What awaits at the end of the journey? The exchange of goods, the interactions with others, the quiet satisfaction of having completed the crossing. These thoughts provide a kind of gentle motivation, a reminder of purpose that exists beyond the present moment, and yet the journey itself remains central. There is no rushing toward the future here. The desert does not allow it. Each day must be lived fully, each mile walked in its time. The traders learn to hold both ideas at once, the awareness of what lies ahead and the focus on what is happening now. This balance is not always easy. There may be moments when the journey feels long, when the repetition becomes heavy, when the horizon seems unchanged despite days of travel. In these moments, endurance becomes something more than physical. It becomes patience, a quiet willingness to continue, even when progress feels slow. To trust that movement is happening, even if it is not immediately visible. To accept that the journey is not defined by sudden milestones, but by the steady accumulation of steps. There is a calm strength in this patience. It does not demand attention. It does not announce itself, but it carries the traders forward, day after day, through a landscape that offers little variation but constant challenge. At times, the environment itself reinforces this sense of endurance. A stretch of particularly soft sand may slow the caravan, making each step require more effort. A day of stronger winds may add resistance, pushing gently but persistently against movement. These conditions do not stop the journey, but they shape it, adding layers of effort that must be absorbed and managed. The traders respond with quiet resilience. They do not complain loudly or resist the conditions. They adjust. They lean slightly into the wind. They shorten their steps when the sand is deep. They maintain their rhythm, even as the effort increases. This is endurance in its purest form. Not dramatic, not sudden, but continuous. And within this continuity, there is a kind of calm. The mind, though it wanders, also learns to settle. The repetition of movement, the simplicity of daily tasks, the steady presence of the desert, all of these elements create a space where thoughts can slow, where awareness can deepen. A trader might find themselves noticing small details more clearly. The way the light changes across a dune as the sun moves, the subtle differences in the texture of the sand beneath their feet, the quiet patterns formed by the wind during the night. These observations are not necessary for survival, but they become part of the experience, adding depth to the otherwise uniform landscape. There is also a sense of scale that begins to emerge. The desert is vast, but the journey, though long, is finite. The traders exist somewhere between these two ideas, moving through something immense, yet following a path that has been traveled many times before. This perspective can be grounding. It places the individual within a larger context, a longer history of movement and exchange. The traders are not the first to make this crossing. They will not be the last. Their journey is part of a continuum, a quiet thread that stretches across time. And within that thread, their endurance takes on meaning. It is not just about reaching the destination. It is about participating in something that connects distant places and distant people. It is about maintaining a flow of goods, of ideas, of relationships that extend beyond any single journey. As the days continue, the traders carry this awareness with them, though often without consciously naming it. It exists in the background, shaping their perspective, adding a quiet depth to their actions. There are also moments of stillness within the movement, a brief pause at the top of a dune, where the view stretches outward in every direction. A moment of rest during the day, where the body relaxes and the mind drifts. These pauses, though short, offer space for reflection, for a gentle recognition of the journey as a whole. In these moments, the weight of the crossing may be felt more clearly, not as a burden, but as something substantial, something that requires effort, attention, and time. And yet, there is no sense of overwhelm, only a quiet acknowledgement. The caravan continues, the steps accumulate, the desert remains vast and patient, and within it, the traders endure, not through force or urgency, but through steady, thoughtful persistence. As the journey nears its later stages, though the end is not yet in sight, there is a subtle shift in awareness. The crossing has become familiar. The rhythms are known. The challenges, though still present, are understood. And within this understanding, endurance transforms into something softer. Not just the ability to continue, but the quiet confidence that continuing is possible. As the caravan continues its steady passage, somewhere beyond the horizon, the journey begins to approach its natural conclusion. There is no sudden sign that announces the end, no sharp boundary where the desert simply stops and something new begins. Instead, as with every part of the crossing, the transition is gradual, unfolding in small, almost unnoticeable ways. The sand begins to change, not all at once but slowly. The dunes may grow less frequent, their towering shapes giving way to flatter stretches of land. The color of the earth may shift, just slightly, hinting at a different kind of terrain ahead. There may be signs of life that were once absent. Small plants, scattered and resilient, appearing in quiet defiance of the surrounding dryness. For the traders, these changes do not go unnoticed. They are subtle, but they are meaningful. Each one suggests that the journey, though still ongoing, is moving toward its end. And with that awareness comes a quiet reflection, one that settles gently into the rhythm that has carried them so far. The crossing of the Sahara is not simply about reaching a destination. It is about the movement itself, the time spent in between, the steady unfolding of days and nights, of effort and rest, of silence and quiet connection. By the time the desert begins to soften at its edges, the traders have already experienced something that cannot be measured only by distance. They have lived within the rhythm of the desert. They have adapted to its pace. They have learned to move with patience, to endure with calm, to rely on one another in ways that feel both natural and necessary. And as the journey begins to draw toward its close, these experiences remain, carried quietly within them. There is something deeply human in this process. To travel across such a vast space, not with urgency, but with steady intention. To carry goods, yes, but also to carry knowledge, memory, and connection. The traders do not leave the desert unchanged. The experience becomes part of them, shaping the way they see the world beyond it. As signs of settlement begin to appear, perhaps distant structures, or the faint movement of other people, the atmosphere within the caravan shifts gently. There is no sudden excitement. Instead, there is a quiet awareness, a recognition that the long continuity of the desert will soon give way to a different kind of space, one filled with voices, with activity, with the exchanges that have been patiently awaited. The goods, so carefully carried, will soon be unpacked. Salt will be weighed and examined. Gold will be measured and exchanged. Textiles will be unfolded, their colors revealed once more. Each item will find its place within the larger network of trade, moving onward, continuing the flow that extends far beyond this single journey. But before that happens, there is still the final stretch. The caravan continues its steady movement, the rhythm unchanged. The traders do not rush. They do not abandon the pace that has guided them safely across the desert. Even as the end approaches, they remain within the same calm flow, respecting the journey until its final steps are complete. There is a quiet wisdom in this, to carry the same care, the same patience, all the way to the end, not to let anticipation disrupt the balance that has been maintained for so long. It reflects an understanding that the journey itself deserves consistency from beginning to end. As they move closer to their destination, the memory of the desert begins to take on a different quality. What was once immediate, the heat, the silence, the endless sand, becomes something that can be reflected upon. The traders may think back on the early days of the crossing, the moment when they first stepped into the vastness, the gradual adjustment to the rhythm of travel. These reflections are not loud or dramatic. They are gentle, quiet, like the memory of a long walk, where each step blends into the next, forming a continuous thread, rather than a series of separate events. There may also be a sense of gratitude, not expressed openly, perhaps, but felt internally. Gratitude for the safety of the journey, for the strength to endure, for the companionship of the caravan, for the reliability of the camels, for the knowledge that guided them across the shifting landscape. These feelings do not need to be spoken. They exist within the calm awareness that the crossing, though demanding, has been navigated successfully. As the caravan finally reaches the outer edges of its destination, the environment changes more clearly. The silence of the desert gives way to the soft sounds of human activity. The stillness is replaced by movement. People going about their daily tasks, voices carried gently through the air, the subtle presence of life in a more concentrated form. For the traders, this transition is both familiar and quietly significant. They have left this kind of environment before, stepping into the desert. Now, they return to it, bringing with them the goods and experiences of the crossing. The journey has come full circle, connecting two worlds that exist in contrast, yet are linked through the steady movement of caravans. The process of arrival is not rushed. The camels are guided carefully, their loads still secure. The traders move with the same calm attentiveness that has defined their journey. There is no need to hurry. The destination is here. The work of exchange will begin soon enough, and when it does, it will follow its own rhythm. Goods will change hands. Agreements will be made. New connections will form. The items carried across the desert will continue their journey in different directions, becoming part of other networks, other stories. But beneath all of this, the memory of the crossing remains, a quiet thread woven into the experience of each trader, a reminder of the vastness they have moved through, of the patience they have practiced, of the endurance they have discovered within themselves. There is something profoundly calming in this story, not because it is without challenge, but because it reveals a different way of moving through the world, a way that values steadiness over speed, awareness over distraction, connection over isolation. The traders did not conquer the desert. They traveled through it. They listened to its rhythms. They adapted to its conditions. They worked together, supported one another, and carried forward not just goods, but relationships that extended far beyond the horizon. And in doing so, they became part of something larger, a quiet network of exchange and movement that connected distant regions, allowing ideas, materials, and cultures to flow across one of the most formidable landscapes on Earth. As the story settles and the journey comes to rest, there is a final sense of stillness. The desert remains where it has always been, vast, patient, and silent. The caravans continue to cross it, as they have for generations, and the traders, each in their own time, carry forward the memory of the long path across the sand, a path marked not by visible tracks, but by experience, by endurance, by connection, and by the quiet understanding that even the longest journeys are made one steady step at a time. Even after the caravan reaches its destination, even after the goods are exchanged, and the familiar sounds of settlement return, there remains something that does not fully fade. It lingers quietly in memory, like a soft echo that continues long after the original sound has passed. It is the silence of the desert, not an empty silence, but one filled with presence, a silence that stretches across hours, across days, across the entire journey itself. For those who have crossed the Sahara, this silence becomes something deeply known, something that settles into the mind in ways that are difficult to describe. To understand what life was like for these traders, one must return, just for a moment, to the long hours between destinations, to the endless dunes, to the steady movement forward when there was nothing visible ahead but more sand, more sky, and the faint suggestion of distance. These were the Sa'at that tested not only the body, but the mind. There were stretches of time when the caravan moved without interruption, without variation, without any clear marker of progress. The landscape repeated itself gently. One dune rising, another falling, the horizon always just out of reach. The sky above remained vast and constant, its color shifting slowly with the position of the sun, but offering little change in form. In these moments, time itself seemed to soften. It did not pass quickly, nor did it drag heavily. It simply existed, stretching quietly between each step. The traders walked within it, their thoughts moving at their own pace, sometimes active, sometimes still. There is something unique about such extended silence. At first, it may feel unfamiliar. The absence of conversation, the lack of external noise, the repetition of the environment, these can draw attention inward in ways that are not always comfortable. The mind, accustomed to movement and change, may search for something to hold on to. But over time, this changes. The silence becomes less of an absence and more of a presence. It surrounds the traders gently, offering a kind of space that is rarely found elsewhere. Within this space, thoughts begin to settle. The constant need for stimulation fades, replaced by a quieter form of awareness. A trader might find themselves simply walking without the need to think actively about each step. The body knows what to do. The rhythm has been established. And so, the mind is free to drift, to observe, or even to rest in a kind of quiet stillness. There are moments when the only sounds are the soft press of feet into sand and the faint shifting of wind across the dunes. These sounds, though subtle, become part of the experience. They are not interruptions to the silence, but elements within it. The desert does not demand attention. It offers a gentle background against which the journey unfolds. And yet, this silence also requires endurance, not in the sense of struggle, but in the sense of continuation. To move forward hour after hour, day after day, without dramatic change, requires a steady kind of patience. It asks the traders to accept the journey as it is, rather than wishing for it to be different. There is a quiet discipline in this acceptance. It is not forced. It grows naturally, as the traders come to understand that the desert will not change its nature to suit their expectations. Instead, they adjust their own perceptions, finding comfort in the repetition, in the predictability of movement. The dunes themselves play a role in this experience. They rise gently from the ground, shaped by the wind into smooth, flowing forms. Walking among them can feel almost like moving through a landscape that is alive in its own slow way. The curves of the Urimel shift with the light, creating patterns that change subtly as the day progresses. Sometimes the caravan will crest a dune, and for a brief moment, the view will open outward. Layer upon layer of sand, extending far into the distance. It is a sight that can feel both calming and immense. There is no urgency in it, no demand. Only the quiet suggestion of space, of distance yet to be travelled. Then the caravan descends, and the view narrows again. This pattern repeats over and over. Rise, see, descend, continue. Within this repetition, the mind finds a kind of rhythm, not the sharp, structured rhythm of tasks and schedules, but a softer, more fluid one. Thoughts come and go without resistance. Memories surface and fade. The present moment, simple and unchanging, becomes easier to accept. There are times when the traders may not think much at all, when the mind, having settled into the silence, simply rests. Awareness remains, but it is gentle, unfocused. The body moves, the caravan progresses, and the desert, vast and steady, continues to unfold around them. This state is not always constant. There may be moments when the mind becomes more active, when thoughts return with greater clarity or intensity. A trader might consider the distance remaining, the condition of their supplies, the well-being of the animals. These thoughts are practical, necessary, but they do not dominate the experience. They rise, are considered, and then soften once more, blending back into the quiet continuity of the journey. There is also a kind of emotional endurance that develops. The desert does not offer the usual markers of progress that one might expect. There are no frequent signs of advancement, no clear indication that the destination is drawing closer. This can create a subtle sense of uncertainty, a feeling that the journey is endless. And yet, the traders continue. They trust the path. They trust the knowledge that guides them. They trust the steady accumulation of distance, even when it is not immediately visible. This trust is part of the endurance. It allows them to move forward without needing constant reassurance, to accept that progress is happening, even if it cannot be easily measured in the moment. There is something deeply calming in this way of moving. It removes the pressure to constantly evaluate, to constantly seek confirmation. Instead, it encourages a quiet faith in the process, in the rhythm that has carried so many before them, across the same vast landscape. As the hours pass, the light changes slowly. The sun moves across the sky, casting different angles of shadow across the dunes. The colors shift gently from pale gold to deeper tones. These changes, though subtle, provide a sense of movement within the stillness. The traders may notice them without fully focusing on them. A slight shift in brightness, a new pattern of shadow. These details add texture to the experience, breaking the monotony in quiet ways. And always, the caravan moves. Step by step, the silence remains, not empty, but full of space, of time, of quiet awareness. For those who have not experienced it, such silence may seem difficult to imagine. But for the traders, it becomes familiar, even comforting. It is the environment in which the journey unfolds, the backdrop against which every step is taken. And in that silence, something subtle takes place. The mind slows. The body aligns with the rhythm of movement. And the journey, though long and demanding, becomes something steady, something continuous, something that can be carried forward one quiet step at a time. Within the long silence of the desert, where the horizon stretches endlessly and the Sahara pass with gentle repetition, something else begins to take shape, something less visible than the dunes and less constant than the sky, yet just as essential to the journey. It is the presence of others, not loud, not overwhelming, but steady, quiet, always there. The caravan, though small against the vastness of the Sahara, carries within it a network of human connection that becomes more apparent as the journey continues. In a place where isolation could easily take hold, companionship emerges not through constant conversation, but through shared movement, shared effort, and a quiet understanding that no one walks alone. There is a particular kind of closeness that forms in such an environment. It is not built through grand gestures or dramatic moments, but through the steady repetition of small, consistent interactions, walking side by side for hours without speaking, noticing when someone slows slightly and adjusting pace without needing to ask, offering help without calling attention to it. These actions, though simple, carry weight. They create a sense of reliability, a feeling that each person is part of something larger than themselves, that their presence matters not just for their own journey, but for the journey of the group as a whole. Trust grows quietly here. It is not declared. It is not tested in obvious ways. It develops gradually through observation and experience. A trader learns who walks steadily, who tends carefully to the animals, who remains calm when conditions shift. These patterns become known, and with that knowing comes a deeper sense of ease. One does not need to watch constantly. One does not need to question every action. There is a comfort in this trust, a gentle relaxation of the mind that allows each person to focus on their own steps while remaining connected to the group. At times, The silence of the desert is shared. Two traders may walk close enough to sense each other's presence, even without exchanging words. The rhythm of their khutuwat aligns naturally, their breathing settling into a similar pace. There is no need for conversation. The connection exists in the shared experience, in the simple fact of moving together through the same space. This kind of companionship is subtle. It does not demand attention. It does not interrupt the quiet flow of the journey. Instead, it exists alongside it, adding a layer of warmth to the otherwise vast and open landscape. During the pauses in the day, this sense of connection becomes slightly more visible. When the caravan rests during the heat of midday, the traders gather, not in tight clusters, but within a shared space. Some may sit near one another, exchanging a few soft words. Others may remain silent, yet still part of the same moment, the same stillness. There is an ease in this arrangement. No one is required to speak. No one is expected to entertain or engage constantly. The presence of others is enough. It fills the space gently, offering a sense of belonging without imposing upon the quiet. In the evenings, as the camp settles and the stars begin to appear, this companionship deepens in quiet ways. A small group might sit together, sharing a simple meal. The act itself is modest, but it carries a sense of unity, each person contributing what they have, each receiving enough to continue. There is no excess, no display, only balance. Conversations, when they happen, are unhurried. A trader might speak of a place they once visited, describing it not in great detail, but in a way that invites calm reflection. Another might respond with a memory of their own. These exchanges are not meant to fill the silence, but to move gently within it, like ripples that fade naturally. Sometimes there is no conversation at all, and yet the sense of connection remains. The traders sit beneath the vast sky, the stars stretching endlessly above them, and in that shared stillness there is a quiet recognition of one another's presence. No words are needed. The experience itself is enough to bind them. There are also moments when this connection becomes more active. When a camel requires attention, several traders may step forward without hesitation, each understanding what needs to be done. One adjusts the load, another steadies the animal, a third checks the straps. These actions unfold smoothly, without confusion or conflict. It is cooperation without instruction, a kind of shared knowledge that exists within the group, allowing them to respond to challenges with calm efficiency. In more difficult moments, this bond becomes even more important. If the wind rises and the sand begins to shift more aggressively, the traders draw closer together. Not in panic, but in quiet coordination. They ensure that no one is left behind, that each person remains within the protective flow of the caravan. There is reassurance in proximity, a glance, a nod, a simple gesture that says, without words, that everything is understood, that the group remains intact. Even fatigue is shared. As the journey continues and the days accumulate, there may be moments when the body feels heavier, when the khutuwat require more effort. In these times, the presence of others offers subtle encouragement, not through spoken motivation, but through example. Seeing another continue, steadily and calmly, can be enough. It reminds each trader that the journey is still moving forward, that the rhythm remains unbroken. And so, they continue as well, their steps aligning once more with the collective pace. There is also a quiet respect that develops within the caravan. Each person brings something different to the journey, experience, knowledge, physical strength, or simple persistence. These differences are not compared or judged. They are accepted as part of the whole. This acceptance creates a balanced environment, one where individuals can contribute in their own way without needing to prove themselves constantly, where the value of a person is understood through their actions, their presence, their quiet participation in the shared effort. Over time, the caravan becomes more than just a group of traders. It becomes a temporary community, one that exists only for the duration of the journey, yet carries within it the essential elements of human connection, trust, cooperation, companionship, and mutual respect. This community does not need permanence to be meaningful. Its strength lies in its simplicity, in the way it forms naturally and functions without excess. It is shaped by the environment, by the demands of the desert, and by the quiet willingness of its members to support one another. And when the journey eventually comes to an end, this community will dissolve just as gently as it formed. The traders will go their separate ways. The goods will be exchanged. The rhythm of the desert will be replaced by the activity of markets and settlements. But something remains, a memory of shared movement, of quiet companionship in a vast and empty world, of the subtle connections that made the journey not only possible, but meaningful. These memories do not fade quickly. They linger, carried forward into future journeys, into future encounters. They shape the way the traders understand not only the desert, but each other. Because in the end, the Sahara is not crossed by individuals alone. It is crossed by people moving together, bound not by loud declarations, but by quiet, enduring connection. As the story of these journeys settles into stillness, as the caravans complete their crossings, and the smooth once more beneath the quiet breath of the wind, something remains that is not immediately visible, yet deeply present. It is the legacy of movement, not just the physical act of traveling across the Sahara, but the slow and steady shaping of connections that extended far beyond any single journey. Over time, these crossings became more than routes. They became threads, quiet, enduring lines that linked distant lands, different cultures, and countless lives. Each caravan carried more than goods. It carried ideas, stories, ways of living and understanding the world. These did not move loudly or forcefully. They traveled gently, embedded within conversations, within shared experiences, within the quiet exchanges that took place at the edges of the desert. A trader arriving in a distant market brought with them not only salt or gold, but knowledge of routes, of customs, of distant places that others had never seen. And in return, they received the same. This exchange was not always immediate or obvious. It unfolded slowly, over generations, shaping the cultures on both sides of the Sahara, in ways that were subtle but lasting. Languages absorbed new words, traditions adapted, materials and ideas blended, creating something that belonged not to one place, but to many. There is a quiet beauty in this kind of connection. It does not demand recognition. It does not seek to stand out. It simply exists, growing over time, carried forward by those who continue the journey. The traders themselves became part of this larger story. Each crossing added to a collective memory, a shared understanding of what it meant to move through the desert, the knowledge of navigation, of survival, of cooperation. These were not static. They evolved, refined with each journey, passed down through generations, not as rigid instructions, but as lived experience. A young trader, walking their first crossing, would observe the quiet confidence of those who had traveled before, the way they read the land, the way they moved with patience, the way they responded to the silence without discomfort. And over time, that knowledge would become their own, carried forward into future journeys, shaping the next generation in the same quiet way. This continuity is part of what gives the story its depth. It is not a single journey, but many. Not a single moment, but a long unfolding across time. The Sahara, vast and unchanging in its presence, becomes a space through which these threads pass, connecting people who may never meet, yet are linked through shared movement and exchange. There is also something reflective in considering how these journeys shaped the way people understood distance. For the traders, distance was not an abstract measurement. It was something felt, walked, endured. Each mile carried weight, not in difficulty alone, but in meaning. The journey was not separate from the destination. It was part of it, a necessary and respected component of the exchange that would take place at the end. This perspective creates a different relationship with travel, one that values the process as much as the outcome, one that recognizes that what is gained along the way, experience, connection, understanding, is as important as what is exchanged at the destination. Over time, the Sahara itself became more than just a barrier. It became a bridge, a space that, while challenging, allowed for connection between regions that might otherwise remain isolated. The caravans transformed the desert from something that divided into something that linked, not by altering its nature, but by learning how to move within it. This is perhaps one of the most lasting aspects of the story. The idea that even the most vast and difficult landscapes can become pathways, not through force, but through understanding and patience. As the centuries passed, the patterns of trade shifted. New routes emerged. New technologies changed the way people moved. But the memory of these crossings remained, embedded in the cultures that had been shaped by them. The knowledge, the stories, the quiet lessons of endurance and cooperation continued to echo, even as the world around them evolved. And still, the image of the caravan persists, a long line of camels moving slowly across the sand, traders walking beside them, their kotuat steady, their movements calm. The sun rising and setting, the stars appearing in the vast night sky. It is a simple image, but one that carries a profound sense of continuity, a reminder of a time when journeys were long, when movement required patience, when connection was built step by step across great distances. There is something deeply calming in returning to this image, in imagining the quiet rhythm of the caravan, the gentle sway of the camels, the soft sounds of movement in the vast silence of the desert. It invites the mind to slow, to follow that rhythm, to let go of urgency and rest within a steadier pace. Because in the end, the story of traders crossing the Sahara is not only about history, it is about a way of being, a way of moving through the world with patience, with awareness, with a quiet respect for both the environment and the people who share the journey. It is about understanding that even in the most challenging conditions, connection is possible, that even in silence there is presence, that even in vastness there is a path. And so, as the story comes to rest, the desert remains wide, silent, endless, and somewhere in the soft memory of the mind, the caravan continues to move, slowly, steadily, carrying with it the quiet threads of human connection across the sands.